Suicide Squad! Fuck you!
Boy, that escalated quickly.
Well, it's good to know that Warner Brothers is already doing my job for me. But regardless, welcome back, true believers, and all you spectacular DC fans out there, to a very interesting Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League related video. Because, yes, shockingly, this game has finally come out of hibernation ever since it was initially delayed all the way back earlier this year in 2023 to now set to fully release later next year in February of 2024. And after nearly a whole year of waiting to see more of this game, we finally did receive an entire gameplay sequence from Warner Brothers and Rocksteady, as well as a behind-the-scenes interview with a lot of developers, diving into exactly what this game is all about, and it looks exactly the same as when we last saw it. So it doesn't seem like it's going to be any different from what we already knew it was going to be, with a live service, online-centric looter shooter. And games like that can work, but as we previously saw with another infamous game that followed this trend of Marvel's Avengers, clearly things did not work out for anyone on the developer side of things, or even when it came to the fans who tried to actually enjoy the game for what it was and instead got let down massively. So today we are going to be talking about exactly why Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League is not necessarily going to do anything that will change the scope and scale of where Warner Brothers Games is going, but also, even more importantly, is that the future of WB Games might in fact end up turning into what we're currently seeing now with Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, which in my opinion is going to be a very, very bad move for every single person involved working on these games. And to help me actually discuss this topic in detail, I do have my best bud, the one and only Irogen, joining me today, obviously known for his incredible videos on his channel talking about everything related to Marvel and DC games. Jake, thank you so much for joining me today, dude. How you doing?
I'm doing so good. Thank you, as always, for having me on. It's always so much fun talking to you. I'm really excited for today's topic. I'm very reserved about the future of DC and Warner Brothers games in the future, just in general. I will say I do think I'm more excited and optimistic for Suicide Squad than you are, so I'm excited for a healthy, nuanced discussion about it. I absolutely have reservations about that game as well. But yeah, I'm very concerned about the seemingly backwards approach that Warner Brothers has regarding their upcoming games. I don't know why they're trying methods that pretty much every other major publisher has tried in the last 5 years and quickly pivoted away from when they didn't seem to work. We've watched it with The Division and Ubisoft, and there was a lot of backlash to that initial game. We've seen it with EA. They tried to do a lot of live service components to the Star Wars Battlefront games. That caused a lot of controversy. Warner Brothers themselves did this with Middle-earth: Shadow of War, and had to completely take all of those monetized elements out of the game because of how much backlash there was to those. So I do think it's an interesting approach to say that pretty much exclusively they are going to push their games in that live service monetized direction going forward. And that does seem to be getting kicked off with Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League.
And I totally agree with you 100%, because not only does this affect Suicide Squad going forward, because it's fine if DC and Warner Brothers wants to try something different and turn Suicide Squad into a fully live service, online-centric looter shooter and make it enjoyable. I'm not saying that the game is going to flop day one, but they really have to make sure that they nail that formula by the time the game releases, so we don't end up seeing another type of Marvel's Avengers scenario on their hands. But at the same time, this is only a glimpse as to what the future of WB games as a whole is going to be. Not just DC games, but the entire properties coming out from Warner Brothers in general. And this comes from the head, the CEO of WB himself, of David Zaslav. In fact, this was actually from an earnings call with all the heads at Warner Brothers, where David went on to say the following related to their gaming division, where, to quote directly from David, he says, "Our focus is on transforming our biggest franchises from largely console and PC based with 3 to 4 year release schedules to include more always on gameplay through live services, multi-platform, and free-to-play extensions, with the goal to have more players spending more time on more platforms. Ultimately, we want to drive engagement and monetization of longer cycles and at higher levels. We have put specific capabilities. We are currently under scale and see significant opportunity to generate greater post-purchase revenue. So for those of you who basically want the too long didn't read version, is that David is essentially saying that every game that is going to be releasing from Warner Brothers is going to be as monetized as possible in order to make the most amount of profit that they possibly can, which I think is not only a terrible decision coming from them, but it also lessens the amount of creativity and innovation that can come from these developers who are working on all these massive Warner Brothers properties. Even as a crazy comparison, earlier this year, a little small indie game that you might not know of called Hogwarts Legacy released from WB Games, which dedicated the player into a totally realized Harry Potter focused world and a single player campaign without any loot boxes, forced multiplayer elements, or continuous live service logging in, battle pass scenario stuff that you see from all these current live service games. This is only hurting them in the long run because this is not what their consumers are wanting to see from all these various properties. Especially if you take into consideration the upcoming Wonder Woman game, which has already been previously confirmed by Monolith Studios that that is going to be a totally single-player, open-world, third-person action-adventure Wonder Woman game. But now, based on recent job listings, it does seem like that they are also going to be incorporating live service elements into Wonder Woman as well, which is completely insane considering that it was already stated from the get-go that Monolith had a clear vision as to where they wanted to take Wonder Woman in her own dedicated experience without trying to force all these exterior factors into the game just to chase the latest trends.
I think that there's a good news, bad news situation here. I think that starting off with the bad news, it does mean that likely for the next 5 years or so, we are probably going to see a lot of these elements that a lot of gamers really detest put into these beloved franchises. I do think similar to EA, however, it's going to be similar to their approach, where many people know the quote that EA gave out years ago, which was single player is dead, multiplayer is the future. And now here they are a few years later making Jedi Survivor, and they're working with Disney to generate single-player Star Wars experiences. Ubisoft had The Division, and it seemed like that could have potentially been a branching off point where a lot of franchises that they own could have gone in that direction of being multiplayer, live service games. But now, not only are they even scaling back Assassin's Creed to be more like the classic Assassin's Creed, they're even trying to bring back franchises like Splinter Cell and Prince of Persia. It seems like this is an approach that many studios and publishers have tried, and it sometimes is successful. We've seen Fortnite, we've seen Destiny, but we've also seen Marvel's Avengers, and we've seen a lot of franchises try this approach, and it seems to work on occasion when it's a game that's built for that type of experience. When it comes to the Arkham games, I don't think anybody finished Batman Arkham Knight and thought, you know what, I really hope the next one is a 4-player looter shooter with live service components. I recently made a tweet where I basically said, I don't think that live service, the idea behind it, is inherently bad. But people hear the words action RPG and immediately get nervous for a lot of games. Whereas you look at a game like Red Dead Redemption 2, it basically has all of the components of an RPG game. It has crafting, it has fishing for food, it has a stamina meter. It has all of those, but it's built into the fiction of the story. And for a lot of these narrative-driven games, I think that's the disconnect. When I'm playing Gotham Knights and I'm spending half of the game in crafting screens with numbers and different types of upgrade paths that I just don't even really know what they mean because it's too sporadic, then I'm immediately taken out of the illusion of playing as one of Batman's sidekicks. Whereas when I'm playing through the story or even playing some of the side missions, I really do start to get invested. I worry that Suicide Squad is going to be in a similar boat, where I'm really going to enjoy the story, I'm going to enjoy all of the Easter eggs to Arkham Knight, but then when I have to go in and sort through the battle pass to decide which costume I want to wear, I worry that that is going to break the immersion. Same when it comes to Wonder Woman. I think Wonder Woman as a base game is going to be incredible. It's probably going to have the Nemesis system, but I don't know what type of live service components you could add to a single player game like that. I also think that it becomes a little bit interesting, and sometimes not in a good way, when you try to combine these different genres. I think part of the reason that Avengers didn't work was it was trying to appease single-player superhero video game fans, but it was also trying to appease fans of games like Destiny and Fortnite, and I think that those are just too different to really try and mesh. And ultimately, when you're making a game, and I'm sure that you'll have something to say about this as well, Evan, I think that if you're building something based on an established IP, you should be building a game around that IP, not the other way around. You shouldn't be trying to force Batman characters into a genre of game that doesn't really work for them. You should be trying to build a game model and gameplay mechanics and a gameplay loop that serve those characters. That's why Insomniac's Spider-Man games are so fun. Everything feels like it's tailored to being a Spider-Man experience. Everything in Batman Arkham Knight feels like it's tailored to being a Batmobile and Batman experience. The Batmobile's got a lot of love in that game. But when it comes to Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, and I fear that this will be the case going forward for a lot of Warner Brothers games, I think that we'll get that to an extent, but I do wonder, would Hogwarts Legacy have been successful, or as successful as it was, if you had to go in and upgrade and customize all the spells, and there had been loot boxes where you could have gotten spells and upgraded the spells that you currently had, or you look at the Mad Max game from a few years ago that Warner Brothers licensed out to make. Would that game have been as fun as it was if you'd had to purchase all of the pieces to your car that you were upgrading? I just think it's a backwards approach, and it's clear that David Zaslav is not a gamer, because you would look at the franchises that you own, if you owned Warner Brothers, and say, you know what, this is perfect for looter shooters and live service games. I don't know why you wouldn't look at the Stephen King properties you own and say, let's make some really cool first-person horror games based on these. Or look at a character like Superman and say, why haven't we done one of these in a while? Let's do an awesome Superman. It just doesn't really make sense to me that you would take it in a direction that fans clearly are disenchanted with. All you really have to do is look at the comments underneath any Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League post. And while there are people like me who watched the Suicide Squad Insider episode today, and we're actually really intrigued by the story, like I was. Again, I think that Metropolis looks really cool. I think the story looks compelling. I'm excited by what they're going to do with the characters. But a lot of us also watched that gameplay and watched the traversal and the combat and thought, I kind of miss the melee stuff from the Arkham games. Or, the traversal doesn't look as interesting as the glider from Arkham Knight or the stuff that they just did in Spider-Man 2. And a lot of people, I don't really fit into this category, but I can understand why people are frustrated, really are turned off by the Battle Pass and the live service components. And I feel like that's all you really need. You look at all of the hype that surrounded Spider-Man 2, and there is not nearly as much for Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. And if I were Warner Brothers, I would be trying to fix that quick, and I would be trying to make games that the fans are asking for.
I think that the goal for all these developers, and mainly the publishers, should be that they need to make a game that does service to the characters rather than the characters being in service of the game. So what I mean by that is the reason why Square Enix believed that it was going to do massive numbers is simply because of the Avengers. Because the Avengers are a well-recognizable brand, they sell everything. At that point, Endgame had just released, so they thought they were on the top of the world, and if they sold an Avengers churro cart, people would buy it. So the fact that they did a live service game based on the Avengers with added characters that would release down the line with more content to come, seemingly thought that they were going to be A-okay just because of the characters that game surrounded. When in reality, it was the exact opposite situation that ended up happening, and they actually lost money because of the format that they went with. And the Suicide Squad, despite what some of you might think, are nowhere near as popular as the Avengers. So we shall see how the game is received by the time it releases in February of 2024, but I think it's logical to assume that the financial statements and records that the game might end up receiving by the time it launches will not come anywhere close to what WB is hoping that it might make, or what we recently saw with a game like Marvel Spider-Man 2 selling over 5 million copies in less than 2 weeks. It probably will not make those types of numbers either. To go back to what you said about making the game based around the character and his or her environment is exactly what we have seen with so many talented developers in the past and what we're getting in the future, where a team like Motive, who is known for their iconic, super fun flying mechanics with Star Wars Squadron, and also their very well-oriented remake that we recently saw with Dead Space, is handling a character like Iron Man and giving him a fully open-world, single-player, story-driven experience. Even a brand new, never-before-seen studio with Cliffhanger Games knows how important the character of Black Panther is and is giving him a totally story-driven third-person action-adventure open-world game, and the same goes for what we're going to see with Wolverine and the Captain America Black Panther World War II game, and all these other upcoming superhero games that we probably don't even know yet from Marvel's pipeline, because they're letting the developers do what they want. They're letting them make the game that they think would do the most amount of justice to the character it's based on. In fact, what we talked about before recording is that there's 2 separate Batman games that are completely different, but each do the character justice. Of course, with the Arkham series from Rocksteady, but also the Telltale series, because in that game we really get to see a completely different side of Batman in a much more story-oriented game without any open-world action, but it still gets the core DNA right of what we expect from a Batman game and what that character embodies and what we expect as the player that we can do in a game focused around Batman. For Suicide Squad, I don't think the first thing that comes in my head relates to Suicide Squad Battle Pass and grinding for the best weapon and gold tier costumes and grinding for the next best set of armor for Deadshot or Harley Quinn. Nothing like that embodies what these characters are. Even though we are supposedly expecting free, new, consistent updates and characters added into Suicide Squad, there's no telling how long this online, always live service, multiplayer, battle pass-centric looter shooter is going to last in comparison to a totally timeless single-player experience like what we previously saw with Insomniac Spider-Man games and like what we're going to get with Wolverine, Iron Man, Black Panther, and so on.
Absolutely. I think that Suicide Squad is a really interesting case where I could see the game being similar to Guardians of the Galaxy. I could see the game coming out, people saying, you know what, this is actually a lot of fun, the story is really cool, and then having some awesome, this isn't like Guardians of the Galaxy, this is where it would deviate, but then there could be some really good, consistent post-launch content. And if people are playing this game and saying, you know what, it does justice to the story following Arkham Knight, it has some really fun combat, it's different than Arkham, but you know what, it works. The multiplayer components are handled really well. If I don't want to play with friends and just want to play it single player, the AI isn't annoying and the AI companions work in the game. I really could see this game surprising a lot of people and being really good, especially because a lot of Rocksteady's strengths lie in their environmental storytelling. Metropolis looks incredible. It could be really fun to explore. Again, I think the story is a really interesting premise where you are taking on the Justice League, and frankly, if Warner Brothers did want a DC-centered live service RPG multiplayer game, I don't think that Suicide Squad is a terrible choice for that. I think that the issue sort of comes in when you realize that this is Rocksteady's first game in nearly a decade. And when people have been waiting and hoping for another Batman game or a Superman game or a Flash game, and you get a multiplayer Suicide Squad game that leans into a battle pass and live service, it's not that that's inherently bad or not needed. It just doesn't feel necessarily like the game people were waiting for and hoping for. Looking at all of the stuff that they showed off in their Suicide Squad Insider video, looking at Metropolis, I honestly just wanted to be playing as Superman flying around that map. I didn't necessarily want to be Harley Quinn swinging around in a sort of Spider-Man looking gameplay mechanic. I also think that had Suicide Squad launched pretty soon after Arkham Knight, or if there had been some other games like Superman and maybe a Batman Beyond game launched around the same time, I think people would be more open to this. And I don't think it's a terrible idea to have these live service games from time to time. I think that you can make different styles and different genres, and if you can really find a way to make these characters organically fit in that type of gameplay loop, I don't see an issue with that. I do think it's a bit strange that they've modeled every character to wield a gun, characters like King Shark and Captain Boomerang. And they have mentioned that more characters could be coming in the future. They're teasing Poison Ivy pretty hard as a character. I mean, is she going to have an RPG in the game? Like, are we going to jump in with Mr. Freeze and his shotgun? I want to be playing as these characters with their unique skill sets and abilities, and to an extent those are there, especially in traversal. But combat, it hasn't sold me yet because it definitely looks like a pretty generic looter shooter with a few interesting mechanics. But that does make me concerned. What does the future hold? Because frankly, I am somewhat excited for Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. I am not writing it off yet. I think that we could all be very surprised by the game. The reason I'm a little more hesitant this time is because that's exactly what I said before Avengers and Gotham Knights, and I was let down by both of those to varying degrees. But with that being said, are we going to get to see another Arkham game or an Arkham-style game ever? Are we ever going to get a Superman game, or is the next game going to be a looter-shooter Justice League game, where all of the Justice League members are carrying miniguns around? It doesn't feel, like you mentioned earlier, like these developers are given as much creative freedom as they would be on a project like the Batman Arkham games. I think some people who are excited for Suicide Squad have a hard time understanding why Arkham fans or fans of these genres are getting frustrated. And to be honest, I don't think it's just because it's new. DC fans have played Injustice 2. They've played Batman the Telltale series. They've played the Lego Batman games. We've played a lot of different styles of games. I think the issue here is similar to the same issue that would rise up if Spider-Man 3 featured a 4-player multiplayer story, RPG mechanics, live service mechanics, and just was not the same franchise. Like if instead of melee combat, you now had web shooter combat exclusively, and it played just like a shooter. Every time an enemy went down, a hologram rose up out of them and went into your character to upgrade them. And it just felt like different DNA for a completely different game. Whereas if it just looks like everything that Spider-Man 2 did, but better, and with new features that really service that gameplay loop, people are going to be more excited. I do think sometimes the live service discussion gets interesting because, like I mentioned earlier, I don't think it's inherently a bad idea. Imagine if Arkham Knight or Spider-Man 2 for 3 to 5 years after launch received really good DLC. Imagine if The City That Never Sleeps wasn't just 3 episodes long, but 20 episodes long. And every couple months for 3 years while we waited for Miles Morales and Spider-Man 2, we were getting prequel DLCs and we were getting new stories with new villains like the Lizard and got some setup for him before Spider-Man 2. That would be really cool, but that's not usually the approach that games as a service games take. Instead, it's generally stuff like, hey, log in every day and kill 3 thugs of this type to get a reward. And that's just not the compelling narrative approach that you would expect for this type of franchise. And so I think the issue is that live service components have not yet found a way to serve these franchises and make those more immersive. Instead, it kind of takes you out of the immersion. So I think that's where Suicide Squad is concerning people. This could be the game to turn it all around. Rocksteady is an amazing studio, but it doesn't necessarily look like that from what we've seen so far. So I'm cautiously optimistic, but I understand why some people are really nervous.
And I guess we're just gonna have to wait and see until February 2024 to find out for sure whether or not this game will actually succeed Marvel's Avengers in every single way possible. But until then, everybody, that is the video that Irogen and I both have for you today, and please let us know all your thoughts in the comment section down below. What do you think about Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, as well as WB Games' future plans to keep making more live service-centric games compared to what we are currently seeing with the more single-player centric Marvel games? Let us know all your thoughts, and I could not do this video without Irogen by my side. Thank you so much for joining me, dude. I had a wonderful time.
Thank you so much again. As always, I had a really fun time chatting with you, and we'll have to do this again soon.
And with all that said, everybody, thank you all so much for watching. Stay awesome, DC fans, and until next time, peace out.